and Cardenas.
Okay, and it involves,
Yes.
I think we'll deal with the items that are on the consent calendar first.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Out of an abundance of caution, I am going to recuse myself on items 5A, B, and C as they involve parties who are also involved in suing me on another matter. So I don't know if should I leave the room?
The tape.
No, because we're not gonna, I'm gonna do 1 through 4.
Okay, 1 through 4, great.
And then,
Then I can leave.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, then you can leave.
Yes, okay.
Okay, if we could read item 1.
All right. Community Redevelopment Agency and Community Development Department reports and CAO and CLA to report relative to possible repayment to CDD of the 20-year Community Development Block Grant Loan of CRA of approximately $4.7 million and a plan to repay the 20-year CDBG loan of approximately $10.1 million.
Okay, so on item 1, it's been suggested that we continue that item. That brings us to item 2.
CRA report relative to a second amendment to the exclusive negotiating agreement to extend the term and recognize Trust South LA as the new name of the Figueroa Corridor CLT and a loan agreement for the CRA to receive $500,000 in pre-development funds from Trust South LA and the Figueroa Corridor Land Company for the Slauson Wall project.
Okay, on item 2, we'll adopt the CRA report. Brings us to item 3.
CRA and CLA reports relative to a cooperation agreement with Bureau of Street Services for as-needed street improvement services not to exceed $12 million for a 3-year period plus 2 one-year options.
Okay, on item 3, we'll adopt the CLA report. On that item, that brings us to item 4.
CRA and CLA reports relative to a cooperation agreement with the Board of Public Works Office of Community Beautification to provide as-needed cleanup and beautification services in various CRA redevelopment project areas. The agreement is not to exceed $3 million and is for a 3-year period with 2 one-year options.
Okay, on that item, we'll adopt the CLA report. I don't see any other public comment cards on any other item, so that would bring us to item 5. So Ms. Perry, it would be appropriate.
Get out. I'm leaving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We'll see you next week, same time. Why don't we read item 5?
A, B, and C?
Yes.
Okay, item 5A, CRA and CAO reports and resolution relative to a disposition and development agreement for the sale of CRA-owned property at 1601 North Vine Street to 1601 North Vine LLC for $825,000 for the development of a commercial office building. This project is located in the Hollywood redevelopment project area. On November 9, 2010, Council referred this matter back to committee, and that applies to items 5A, B, and C. 5B, communication from the CRA in response to motion Zine for Garcetti, Perry, relative to information regarding the final environmental impact report for the 1601 and 1605 Vine Street project. 5C, CRA report relative to authorization for a budget amendment for the CRA to receive $250,000 in reimbursement from the developer pursuant to the settlement agreement upon the occurrence of certain conditions, thereby reducing the CRA's contribution to the settlement from $650,000 to $400,000.
All right. I think maybe we'll start out with public comment. In fact, I think I want the department to come. We'll start with the report.
Morning, council members. Jim D'Antona for the Community Redevelopment Agency, along with Laura Bell from our Hollywood project area and Franco Pacelli from our Hollywood project area. Last time this item was here, there were a lot of significant questions, good questions raised by this committee and also by the City Council at large that need answers. We provided a report that was put together by our staff of all of those questions, trying to address all of them and flesh out the answers that everyone deserved and hopefully got in this report. I will turn it over to Nilura here, and she will kind of go through the three or four main parts that are the biggest issues, and we'll be more than happy to answer all those questions for you.
Okay, good morning, council members. So, when we were here last, the council and public concerns were related to the appraisal process and CRA-LA's acquisition of the project in 2006, the disposition price, and the benefits of the project to the city were the key parts. So I'll start first with the appraisal process. When we were attempting to acquire this process, it was at the height of the real estate market. And then CRA obtained an appraisal of the site from Pacific Real Estate for $4.07 million on May 23, 2006. And the developer also obtained an appraisal because they were required to get it because they were going to get an acquisition lender before CRA was going to take action to acquire the site. So they got an appraisal dated May 25, 2006 for $5.45 million. At that time, CRA had administrative procedures to reconcile differences in prices, and one of those, because of the fast-paced market, is that staff had the authority to negotiate a price that's 20% higher than the appraised value that we had obtained, which would have enabled us to pay $4.8 million. But that wasn't the case, and so we did need to go to the board, and so that is what we did. We went to the board and sought authorization to pay $5.45 million based on the C.B. Richard Ellis appraisal. There was at the time also a process whereby, in order to reconcile appraisals, staff would get a internal review of the appraisals. Based on the records that are available, it appears that staff requested, the senior real estate officer requested from the appraisal manager a in-house review of that appraisal. There's a documentation that has that request. However, the documentation of the review itself is not available for us to review. And so in the last couple of months, we have attempted to better understand the differences of the appraisals, and so CRA retained a consultant to review the appraisal, and that consultant concluded that it was...
Stop 1 second. Mr. Reyes wants to...
Yep. I just want to be clear, when you say it's not available, it's not available because...
We can't find a record of it. We have a record that the senior real estate officer requested the review from the real estate appraisal, appraiser at the time, but we cannot find in any of the files the review that compares the two appraisals.
For the sake of clarity, thank you.
Huh?
For the sake of clarity, thank you.
Thank you.
Continue.
So, again, we did another review more recently that concluded that the value was 4.07, was more accurate at the time. However, the developer also did another subsequent review, and that appraiser concluded that 5.45 was more accurate. And so what that says to us that you know, there are still today a range of opinions from appraisers that are quite difficult to reconcile. But the thing that we would like to highlight are two things, is that when this was taken to the board for an approval, it simply said that we will purchase the site for 5.45 based on a standard acceptable appraisal. We do feel at this time that we should have been clearer at that time, and the board memo should have had a discussion indicating the findings of the review appraisal, and that should have been a discussion in the board report. However, it was not, and we admit our culpability, you know, in that regard, and it didn't happen. However, the other thing we want to bring out is that we did not provide any additional benefit to the current developer. We paid exactly what the developer paid from the seller of the property, who was Ullman Properties, who did not want to sell directly to CRA, but CRA wanted to control what was developed on the site. So we didn't pay the current developer, Pacifica Ventures, anything more than they paid the developer for the site. So we think that they negotiated an arm's length deal based on appraisal that the bank at the time wanted from C.B. Richard Ellis, which was one of their approved appraisals. So we thought that it was a good appraisal. We believe that there was a reconciliation of it, but we don't have the record of it. So then we get to the disposition price that the reuse analysis says that we should pay. And basically, the report was done by Kaiser Marston that says that based on a reasonable return that the developer should be allowed to make, and based on the cost that it will take to develop the project, that the land value, reuse land value, should be $825,000.
Just to interject here, real quick, the reuse value is established that would take the total costs to develop the Class A office space, plus return, soft cost, investment, interest, hard cost to develop, and then subtracts out how much they would be projected to earn over that time. The difference between how much they're projected to earn and the cost is where we are seeing the cost of the land. That's where they inject the land so that all those finances balance out. So when we're doing land reuse value, we are looking at how much the total cost of the development is and how much revenue they would be anticipated to receive. That gives you a land value cost, which is the $825,000.
Right, and we should note that that value would be the same whether we paid 5.45 for it or 4.07. The 825 would still be the reuse value, and the reuse value is lower than the acquired value because we were putting certain demands and certain restrictions on what the developer could do on that site. So that lowered its actual value of the site. But again, it would be 825 whether we paid 5.45 or 4.07. So where we are today is that despite having not done a good job of disclosure to the board initially about the differences in the price and how we reconcile them, is that we own the site and we still think that the development of office space is still critical to the continued revitalization of Hollywood and retaining and attracting major entertainment office uses, and that the project is sound and that it will create the investments and benefits that we want to create for the city, including some 483 permanent jobs, $20.3 million in property tax income, 13 of which would be tax increment financing. And then the other, in addition to the direct jobs, we use the construction business industry's calculator for indirect jobs, and that provides another 1,100 jobs in addition to the 487 permanent direct jobs from this particular project. So those were the key concerns that were raised at the last meeting, and I will see if Jim or Franco want to add anything.
Well, the only other item I think that came in front was that the disposition, there was a question about the strength of the developer, and our staff went and talked to the development. There was some question about development in New Mexico, whether they could handle this. And there is some pending court matters on that, but the project was developed. They have the capacity to do it. The developer has issues. They're here. They can address those. But specifically, we went and looked at the development that was in question, and the development got done. It got leased up. It got used. That it didn't have. There were some other legal issues that they had to work with, but the developers could provide what they needed to provide. This also, again, I think Nilura made a good point, which is we own the site today. That's a fact. And if we do analysis today based on doing that reuse calculation, right now we're getting $825,000 for the sale of the land. If we did that reuse value today, I can't say that we would even get that amount. We may not get any based on that value. In fact, at some point, we may actually, in order to get Class A office space on this site, have to give more money to it. So I believe that from the analysis that was done, certainly the CRA admits the mistakes of not notifying the board, nor the council, nor that we had a second appraisal. That was corrected 18 months ago when we crafted written procedures to deal with that issue. But again, I think that the overall project still makes sense, no matter what mistakes were made at the CRA.
And the other thing, I'm sorry, just one more thing to add, is that, and the site will not be conveyed to the developer until they have a commitment to lease 60% of the space. That's a requirement of both any construction lender as well as written into our DDA.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you to stay there. We're going to do public comment. We've got an open chair, so we'll start out with Hal Castersky. Morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Hal Katersky. I'm the developer on this project from Pacific.
Wait a minute. I butchered your name that bad? What?
It's been butchered worse, sir.
No, repeat it for me, please.
Katersky.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please go on, yeah.
Thank you, sir. 1601 Vine has been a project that we were approached to by the CRA over 4 years ago. This project has been designed by Gensler to be a world-class 100,000 square foot office building, 8 stories up and 5 stories below ground. And the 5 stories below ground is to meet all the parking requirements. We'll be able to park an additional almost 200 cars. Those parking spaces will be available on weekends and nights, which serves the needs of the Hollywood community, which has a critical parking shortage during those periods of time. This is a green building. It will be classified as a gold LEED building, which we're happy to say. The important thing from the benefit side, though, is that there'll be about 350 construction jobs, and those construction jobs will last 2 years. It's a long construction project because we are going underground. All of the contractors and subcontractors will be union contractors. All of the projects we do, and we work nationally, are always all union projects. And during the next 10 years, the City of Los Angeles and the CRA will be able to benefit to the tune of about $32 million from this project, both in property taxes, licenses, fees, tax increments, business licenses, and sales tax. This is a shovel-ready, ready-to-go project, and we have spent $4 million in the last 4 years of our own money on this project, and that money has been spent on the entitlement process, on engineering, and on architecture. All of our contractors and subcontractors are local contractors. We only work in the local market. We have the support of the Chamber of Commerce, the neighborhood councils, and all of our neighbors.
Keep going, finish it. Keep going.
You may hear some comments about Pacifica, but during the last several years, which have been very tough development years, as I know you're well aware, we have been able to develop and build several 100,000 square feet of office space throughout the United States and in Southern California. There are no lawsuits against us, and we have been able to settle the issue of Molly's, which came up in the middle of this process with the help of the CRA. No new Class A office buildings have been built in Hollywood in over 25 years. It was a priority project when this project started for the CRA, and the need exists then, and the need exists today for more Class A office space in Hollywood.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
But if you'd stick around, there may be a question someone might have for you.
I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
William Delvec.
Honorable Council Members, William Delvac of Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac on behalf of the applicant, the developer. You heard the report from the CRA, and you've heard Mr. Katersky's remarks. I'd just like to add a few things. 3 months ago, we were in this room, and very important questions were raised. We believe they were good and real questions, and we appreciate the opportunity to both present the real answers to the CRA and now to this committee. And I'd just like to highlight a few important points. Among the most surprised people that the CRA had another appraisal was my client. We did not know there was another appraisal. We didn't know what it said. The developer went out and got an appraisal because no bank would loan money on a project like this without an appraisal. And so that appraisal was done. And I would note that we've submitted to the record a detailed analysis of both. A couple of very key factors about the two appraisals. The most recent comp on the CRA's appraisal is the same date as the oldest comp on the bank-required appraisal. So you've got this huge gap of 6 months of a rising market where the CRA's appraisal didn't account for any of the changes in the market. And I think it may be hard to remember now, but there was a time when real estate prices were rising every week. And that's what happened in that 6-month period of time. I'd also note that the quality of the properties appraised were very different. None of them were close by. They were inferior lots. They weren't corner lots. So we believe on the record, the information is that the bank-required appraisal, which was disclosed to everyone, is the appropriate one. But in any event, the developer didn't participate in that part of the issue. Ms. Bell said something that is substantially correct, that the developer made no money on the transfer from the acquisition, the facilitation. In fact, my client lost money. It absorbed transaction costs. So we actually paid a price for transferring the property. If I just have another minute or two, I would like to note that because of the developer's commitment to union labor, that there is a signed project labor agreement, and we're very proud to have the support of the unions. Questions were raised about the developer's qualifications. There's a detailed list in our submission about other similar projects. Questions were raised about the need for Class A office space, and I believe the CRA in its report did an excellent job demonstrating the importance of large contiguous floor plates in terms of retaining jobs in Hollywood. So we are very pleased to present the answers. I will tell you we are concerned and frustrated about the time of this. My client mentioned they have $4 million at stake. They were at City Council 7 months ago. First, we had a challenge that we settled with one of the concerned parties.
Okay, wrap it up.
Anyway, we do appreciate the opportunity. We believe the time for action is now.
Okay, thank you. We've been joined by Council Member Richard Alacon, Nicole Shahinian. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Nicole Shahanian with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Hollywood Chamber, I'm here to show our strong support of the 1601 Vine Street project. The project will provide Hollywood with an 8-story LEED-certified Class A office building containing approximately 108,000 square feet of leasable space. As you may know, there's a real need for new office space to be built in Hollywood. We have very few Class A office buildings and have lost a lot of office space due to conversions to residential. In fact, there's not been a new office building erected in the last 30 years with the exception of the new Technicolor building, which was fully occupied by that firm. The Chamber is committed to keeping Hollywood as the entertainment capital of the world. If we expect to attract new entertainment companies, we simply must build new office space. As you may know, Live Nation recently just moved 400 jobs from Beverly Hills to the 7060 Hollywood Boulevard building, showing that there is potential to attract more entertainment firms to Hollywood if we simply build the space. If Hollywood is going to remain a vibrant commercial center, new office space is essential. We strongly encourage you to approve this project as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Frank Defoe. And after Frank will be Gilbert Smith. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. I'm here, Frank Defoe, I'm here representing both 1601 and Vine and the Ricardo Montalban Theater next door. I've been working with both of these groups for 4 years to resolve property issues between the two organizations. And I've been a developer for some 40-odd years. I redeveloped the 5-city block La Mesa Village Plaza just outside of San Diego with a mixed-use project, and I must share with you the dynamics are very similar. I paid $750,000 for 5 city blocks, which the city paid well over $6 million for, and got all sorts of criticism on that. By developing that site, we ended up paying back the La Mesa Redevelopment Agency, not in the 5 years which was projected, but in 3 years, because of property taxes, sales taxes, on and on, back to the city. is a resounding success with the redevelopment agency interacting. From my perspective, 1601 Vine represents a commodity that will assist the synergism with the Montalban Theater, which Gil Smith, following me, will talk about. But that synergism between Class A entertainment corporations, big business, which are looking for space here, and John Tronson will fill in that a piece, and the live theater, the Hollywood and Vine corridor, the live part of that circle of influence, I see as being very, very important for the bridging of those two properties. Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, Gilbert. And after that will be John Tronson. Yes.
Good morning, council members, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Gilbert Smith, and I'm chair of the Ricardo Montalban Foundation, owner and operator of the Ricardo Montalban Theater. I came on board in 2006, and a lot of the areas of development are of my concern, and the 1601 project came onto our radar screen, and we had a very successful negotiation with the developer in order to mitigate the problems during the construction process and also the reliant, let's say, entertainment factor that their office building would represent to us. Having a live theater is very unique. There are only two in Central Hollywood right now that are operating, the Pantages and ours. And our longevity, in part, is going to be due to having entertainment partners or business partners as we've had with Nike. They're coming back for one more year, and it's allowed us to redevelop the theater, which was basically a historic structure built in 1926, but sorely in need of repair. And live entertainment has been challenged by many developers in that they've turned the Avalon into a nightclub, the Music Box into a nightclub. It's no longer audience rated. And the core of our mission is to create community access and new jobs in the entertainment industry. We believe that the office building to the south of us will give us that sort of access and ability to fulfill our mission. Thank you very much.
I want to ask one question, and I'm just really curious. You referenced a relationship, a partnership with Nike. How does that work?
Nike came into our theater in 888 in conjunction with their support of the U.S. Olympic endeavor for the team and their sponsorship. Nike was going to be there for 3 months, but in the ensuing relationship that we developed with Nike, they saw that the event space and what they could do with us with the outreach to the community, the schools, and other organizations, teaching sports. We built a sports court on the roof. Council may be aware of it. Mr. Cardenas has been to our facility. It was a $500,000 project, and it was a phase one of a redevelopment of the theater to create more space than the main theater complex. What Nike has been able to do is to bring in their sports personalities, the community free of charge, to view events, have instruction from teachers in the arts, the sports, and all different endeavors in the community of art. So it's been a very, very positive relationship, and at the same time, Nike worked with us not only on the monthly cost of operating the theater, but supported us with in-kind so that we were able to rebuild the sound, the lighting, and other technical portions of the theater.
Any other partners like that you're affiliated with or associated with, or?
We are engaging.
And let me be, the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center is in the district that I represent.
Correct.
And I know how challenging it is to keep a theater going, so I thought maybe I could get an idea or two from you, so that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, they're finding valuable partners. It's sort of, do we find them or do they find us? Certainly,
Excuse me, can I
Yes.
interrupt and say that Nate Holden is quite a performer, but he ain't Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as the swashbuckler type.
Well, and having Mr. Montalban as the founder of our foundation, and his spirit and his guidance with me in the early stages of my tenure at the theater were very beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
All right. But in keeping with the finding partnerships, we recently met with Senator Price. He was not aware of our theater, so from a state level, he heads up the Arts Commission. We met with a group out of Minneapolis called Place.net. That's very interesting because they had a challenge in Minneapolis where they had to move the Schubert Theater to a new location. It was the largest single building transfer. It's about the size of our building. We are, 28,000 square feet of cement and rebar. And they built artist residence around the theater.
Really?
And it's a very interesting project. So we connected with them 2 weeks ago. They saw a performance of Traces, which was Nederlanders is another organization we've partnered with recently. And we are expecting to continue to do that in the future with them. So,
all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. John Tronson? Morning.
Morning, council members. My name's John Tronson. I'm one of the owners of Ramsey Schilling Commercial Real Estate. We're a 52-year-old commercial real estate firm, and I'm in charge of handling the office leasing for the 1601 Vine Tower. As has been mentioned by a couple people before, I just wanted to speak to the issues specifically about the community benefit of this particular project. As we've seen with some of the larger catalytic developments, especially on the mixed use and retail side in Hollywood, it's really jump-started what has been a tremendous success as it relates to the blossoming of those residential and retail markets. We've not had any significant office space built in many, many years, has been mentioned, but especially Hollywood has really never had an iconic world-class office building. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to take advantage of. As was mentioned by the representative from the Chamber of Commerce, we had Live Nation come from Beverly Hills and move to Hollywood. Recently, we had Jonas Brothers Management Group leave Beverly Hills and come to Hollywood. We're very close to a significant transaction with AOL leaving Beverly Hills and coming to Hollywood. And this is really a radical change in the course of direction of the way the river used to run. It used to run away from Hollywood and towards Santa Monica and West Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and we were losing tenants. And we have an opportunity now to recapture a lot of those tenants. There's a tremendous amount of momentum in the office market. Why? And we just simply don't have the type of product.
Why is that momentum shifting?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the amenity base that has been developed around many of the CRA projects. There was the original Trizicon project, which is now Hollywood and Highland, the Cinerama Dome, Holly West, Sunset and Vine. Things became significantly better from an amenity perspective because it used to be you could eat at Hamburger Hamlet right across from the Chinese Theater, and that was the only game in town. But now there are restaurants on every corner, and some of them are some of the best restaurants we have in the city. David Myers just bought the northeast corner of Hollywood and Vine to put his new pizzeria concept. And, Katsuya's doing $1,000 a foot out of the other corner of Hollywood and Vine, and Cleo's opened, and Eva Longoria's opened her restaurant with Todd English. I mean, things have exploded. That's one of the reasons. Public transportation is another one. It's simply impossible to get in and out of the west side of L.A. anymore. Most of the employees that work at these large new media organizations, they live in the San Fernando Valley or they live in Hollywood, and they just can't get in and out of Santa Monica or Playa del Rey. And probably the most important thing that has transformed that area has really been a clean and safe initiative that's been ushered in by the business improvement districts and the Los Angeles Police Department. Okay. They've just taken the streets back, and it is just it's one of the safer places to be in the city, and it was not that way.
Mr. Chairman, if I may volunteer, as Chair of Plum, I can tell you in the past 5 years, one of the most robust areas in development projects has been the Hollywood area. along with the central downtown. And so tend to be the two pockets where you've seen an amazing amount of transactions and building permits and a whole range of activities. So it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, because see, what's happening in the district that I'm fortunate enough to represent, we're beginning to see entertainment industry type jobs come to the west side of the district. And so I was just curious to see what you thought the reasons were for the shift to your area.
It's a lot of different reasons. It takes a while to turn the battleship around, I can tell you, but I can remember it was the catalytic project at Hollywood and Highland that ended up falling on its face, by the way, economically, but it started to turn things around, and the El Capitan, and it was just one at a time, and then and eventually it has come back to being a very attractive place for a lot of high-profile office tenants, and we'd like to have an opportunity to continue that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Mcnaughton. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Richard Mcnaughton, a 40-year resident of Hollywood. In the best of times, the CRA is a financial albatross around the city of Los Angeles, but in the worst of times, I think it's lethal to our finances. And I think that this project is the poster child for what is wrong with the CRA. The report, which is the February 3rd, 2011 report, does not answer all the questions. It does indicate, however, that there is no defense to the allegations that there was fraud upon the city council back in 2006 because the CRA withheld its appraisal, which was lower. It went forward and represented the city council. There was only the developer appraisal. We've heard a lot of talk about this reconciliation and that there was a request for the reconciliation. Well, they've never produced to us the document, or to this committee, the document by which that reconciliation was requested, but they seem to say that it's there. I think if they will produce it to you, you'll see it was probably made around August, and if the city then acted upon this the next month in September. Now they say, oh, well, this is obviously lost and it was done. Well, one might believe that over the years it was lost, but you're not going to believe that over the year that it was lost within 1 month between August and September. The document simply never existed and never existed because they were concealing the CRA report. Now,
don't worry about it. You're going to get extra too, so just don't. I see you looking. Just go on. Let it go.
Okay,
let it
thank
flow.
you very much. So this is one aspect that requires not an audit or a financial investigation, but it does require that there be a criminal probe about exactly how this came about, and relying upon the people who were involved in perpetrating the probe, being the CRA in general, is not an adequate investigation and will not satisfy many people in the city of Los Angeles. The other aspect I'd like to point out about the February 3rd, 2011 report by the CRA is, sadly, it perpetrates additional frauds upon this committee and the city council and the public. Now, I have detailed these in a few writings that were submitted, one last night and I gave another one this morning. I hope you'll have a chance to read these before you make a decision on this matter. But the particularly egregious is the way they cover it up and concealed the financial problems of Mr. Katursky. He has had numerous lawsuits. Check of the records show over 30 lawsuits in the LA Superior Court. He was sued back in 2003 in New Orleans when he represented, he was a waste disposal expert. He had trouble with the SEC in Oklahoma, and from what I understand was not allowed to ever issue any more securities or have anything to do with securities in Oklahoma. The recent project in Albuquerque, the last document I saw from the bankruptcy court, forced him totally out of the project. So this was not a situation where someone got in trouble, they reorganized, and he's going ahead. No, he's been pushed out of it. I think that all this information should have been presented to this committee so they would know everything about Mr. Katursky's background before entrusting him with millions and millions of dollars. Now, if this project is so vital to the city of Los Angeles, then you're going to want to have the best person possible in charge of the project. I would say that you're going to have a hard time finding anyone with a worse track record outside of state prison than Mr. Kratursky in order to be giving millions and millions of dollars to. I think the time has long passed that an independent agency such as the FBI be called in to investigate this from the criminal aspect, not just from an audit. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you. Stephen Box. Morning.
Morning. My name's Stephen Box. I'm a candidate for City Council representing District 4. I live in Hollywood, walking distance from 1601 Vine. I also work in the entertainment industry, and I assure you that as a producer, the last thing we need in Hollywood is more office space. The reason there's no office space been built for the last 3 decades is because there's been a glut of office space. And in fact, if you ask the entertainment industry what we want all of the companies that left to go to Culver City, Santa Monica, Burbank, and Glendale to come back. They're the services that we depend on, not office space. And in fact, even Film LA left Hollywood and went downtown. So it's not office space, I assure you. This is what I would call industry washing to make a project look viable. And in fact, if 1601 were viable, it would take off under its own momentum and credibility, of which it lacks both. I am concerned about the significant number of times this project has come to the City Council, 12 times last year, and each time it gets coddled and massaged and shifted and shuffled, and here we are again today. And in fact, even the Vice Chair of the CRA Commission referred to this project as the poster child for the abolishment of the CRA. We'll end up spending more money at this rate on this particular parking lot and the development of this building than we spent on the W Hollywood across the street, a project that is enormous and dwarfs this particular project. All of which brings me to what I would consider to be a very specific priority, which is to look at this not just as a simple project, but as an example of what's wrong with the CRA, and an opportunity, a call to action, if you will, for a city prosecutor. The people of LA are represented at the state level with an attorney general, and yet the state has state council. At the county level, there's a district attorney representing the people of LA, and there's county council. But here in the city of LA, there's a city attorney that represents the city officials, and the people of LA are unrepresented. In a situation like this, who do we turn to? And I believe that we need a city prosecutor that will represent the people of LA and investigate with full authority, not just the 1601 project, but the CRA itself. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I do agree with you on one thing, that this project is kind of like, the biggest mistake you can ever make in life is to feed a stray cat once, give him some milk, because you never get rid of it. So hopefully we are in the process of getting rid of this cat one way or the other. Thank you for coming. And that brings Marcel Porras from Council President Eric Garcetti's office. Morning.
Good morning. Marcel Porras, Senior Planning and Economic Development Deputy for Council President Garcetti. Just here this morning to speak in support of the project and ask the committee to make a recommendation to move these items forward to council. As we all know, the development environment is very different today than it was several years ago. We do believe that there was some issues with this project moving forward. There was a lack of transparency, which is why the council president asked that this item be vetted thoroughly before the CRA board, which we believe it has been. The question now, we're at a moment, is whether or not this project is a viable project, which we believe it is. Moving forward, the priorities of the council president are to create jobs in this environment and to move forward. So in addition, I'd like to also note that we've submitted some additional findings for the committee to review in regards to this project. If there are any other questions available. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. I have one question. Then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I hate when I hear the word fraud. and I think when that word comes up, that it is, we're responsible to really vet this, clean this, because nobody sitting up here wants to do anything that is, fraud related. So we take those accusations very seriously. So if you could just go over why you feel comfortable, what you did look into, what you didn't look into, and why didn't you look into it, or whatever, because I would really like to know that.
You're talking about in reference to the appraisal?
I'm talking about, and
The
you've been...
project in general.
The project in general.
In general, okay.
Because this has been discussed here, this has been discussed at council, there's articles, there's blogs, there's concerns, so I just want somebody to try to deal with those issues.
Well, I think first we can say that certainly we're sorry that it had to come to this. We are glad actually it was brought to our attention. As you know, Chris Essel got there 8 months ago, and most of our staff has come here. That is not an excuse. That is to say, once we learned of this, she ordered an immediate audit of what happened in this case, made sure the procedures had been changed appropriately. The issue of the appraisal should have been noted in the project, but that doesn't mean that what happened was fraud. The $5 million that was in that appraisal that the bank accepted to make this transaction happen between parties A and B, the current developer being party B, was a legitimate and legal document that was setting the market value. Another appraiser, I'm sure a lot of you have dealt in the real estate market, can come up with different numbers based on what they believe is by right and what's accepted. But that was a transaction between those two, and we paid the fair market value of that project at B. Now, that doesn't, we had an appraisal. We should have, that's a public document. We should have told everybody. But that doesn't mean that the price was fraudulent. It was the right price. We should have been able to explain to you what was wrong with that, the way that the developer, the auditor they brought in to look at it did. That is neither here nor there at this point. We need to give you all the information, and we have, for you to make a decision. We believe, based on independent financial analysis by Kaiser Marston, that the price we are getting of $825,000 for the land bears out through all of the indicators and costs and revenues that would be associated with the project. So I see that we have to accept the responsibility for this community redevelopment agency not putting that in writing, and we have fixed it, and we have to come to you and tell the community and tell everybody that we fixed it and give you the correct information, but also tell you that the project still makes sense, because when you do that analysis, the reuse analysis, we still get $825,000 of payment for the project, for the land that we're providing. So whether we paid 5.4 or 4, that number of $800,000 doesn't change.
Okay, members? Mr. Reyes?
When we look at the notion of benefit, you look at the process of investment, and you've described to a certain degree what's been questioned and what's questionable. Now you're asserting that there is some level of clarity that speaks to how the process unfolded and where the mistakes were and the mea culpa factor here. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to know very clearly, what are we giving up in our subsidy? What did we invest? I want it very clear. And I want to understand, what are we getting back in return that makes this viable? Mm-hmm. I've been hearing yes, and I've been hearing the generic terminology. I've been hearing a lot of adjectives that really are, to me, still nebulous. Sure. I need to be very clear.
Okay.
This is what we put into this deal,
Mhm.
and this is what we're getting back.
Right.
I want to make very clear what this means.
Okay, so the initial amount we put in was $5.45 million. We've made another $500,000 payment to Molly's Burger for relocation. So we're, at 5.9 on that particular point. And then we've had some, other administrative and overhead costs, which bring it to about $7 million, or it will be by the time the project gets developed. And then our projections show that the gross tax from the project through the year 2007, when the Hollywood project area expires, will be $20.3 million, and 13-point-some million of that will be tax increment financing that would flow to the project area. So those are the benefits in that particular regard. I'm sorry, 2027, I'm sorry. So those are the financial kind of benefits, and then there is another projected...
Okay, so just for those of us who are English majors, not math majors, how much was put in, and how much is going to be gained? So you've given me how much we've spent,
right,
and you've given me projections of what you anticipate. What's the incremental difference? What are we going to gain?
So the net difference between the two.
Net about $6 to $7 million of tax increment will be the profit, so to speak, to the city.
To the community
To the
redevelopment.
community.
So we invested how much again?
So we invested 6 after we sell back the land, and we're going to get back 12-ish in tax increment.
So the number she gave you was 7.1 of total investment. They're going to pay back $825,000 on the land value. Brings us to about 6.3. After we get about 13 million back, we'll be at $6.8 million back in tax revenue by the time the Hollywood project ends.
So the city will make $6 million
Correct.
based on the decisions you're asserting today.
Correct. And that doesn't even count indirect costs that we aren't putting into the analysis, that increased revenues for sales tax, for food and utility, everything that comes off of that.
What are your assumptions in creating this $6 million benefit or $6 million return? What are your assumptions? Are there any assumptions we should be aware of?
Property tax value, right?
Property tax value.
Increase.
Increase with inflation.
So
unless we have serious deflation and major reassessments, but
we've had, where we are right now, we're looking out, the projection is that what will be the property value at 2027 versus once that is built. So at that point, what is that increase total? And that would be the property tax that comes back to the redevelopment agency.
Is it safe to say that if the CRA had not injected itself into this property, the property might not have realized that level of return?
Definitely, because you had Molly's, had its site there. I mean, Molly's Burger is the one we did a negotiation with. Anybody who came to that site was going to have to work a deal to try and relocate them. They were tough. It was a tough negotiation. It was a long negotiation with them. We have injected ourselves to try and bring that all together, and I think it was part of our investment that has led us to this, being able to...
Okay, and last question is, I like to see what you just said in writing.
Okay.
It needs to be very clear, and I want it to be very specific, with assumptions added as your notes, so that we understand what the numbers mean based on your assumptions, because you're not predicting the future. The gas prices went up. We have a lot of intangibles out there in the economy, so we need to understand the quality of your assumptions.
And you want to see all of our data that points to this income at the end of the
And it needs
project.
to be very clear what we are gaining from this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Alarcon or Cardenas?
Recognizing that we've had a horrible financial picture in the last several years, how has CRA done on its tax increment projections over the last 5 years?
Of where we were projecting to be and where we are now today?
How accurate have they been?
We've actually been a little conservative. We've actually come in, our projections have, we predicted we'd be lower, and they've actually come in higher.
Okay, can we get documentation to that effect?
Sure, in our budgets, we put out how much we project, and then we get our actual, so we can...
I don't want a budget. I want a specific analysis of the tax increment projections and what they have actually been over the last 5 years. And what is the, as Mr. Reyes said, the assumption for tax increment that is going to be generated from this project? I mean, there isn't a person in the city of Los Angeles, or in the United States for that matter, who is a bit skeptical of financial projections at this point. How can we have confidence in the projections that you are forecasting? I mean, what is the rate of inflation? You said it's based on inflation. Well, I haven't seen inflation, in property values in 5 years. So what is, tell me if I'm wrong.
Well,
but
I mean, real estate has grown on average around 7% historically.
Historically dating back to when?
But inflation typically has been 3% since we started recording, those factors. We use 3%. We could be wrong.
Okay, wait a minute. You're speaking in gross generalities here. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for more specific, in light of the financial crisis that we've had. So when you say historically, what history are you talking about?
You're right. There's no way we could predict the future. So
Yeah, I'm asking you a specific question. Can you answer it?
What's the question?
You said historically.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
An average of the last, say 60 to 70 years.
60 to 70 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the last 5?
Well, sir, and not to argue the point, but there were dramatic increases and dramatic decreases in that time. To use the 60, 70 to try and find that balance.
Well, but we're not looking for the benefit of this project in 60 years.
Well, 25.
We're
20.
looking. No, you said 2027. That's 16 years.
Sorry.
That's a much shorter time period than 60 years.
You know what we could do is a sensitivity analysis where we show no growth, we show average growth, and we show even decreasing numbers to show, we can't predict, but we can show these could be the best, worst, and average case scenario.
I think, that would be much more beneficial to us.
Yeah.
And give us a much greater sense of confidence in what we're voting for, because as much as I believe that the economy has begun to start turning around, I'm not necessarily going to bet the market on it. I'm certainly not buying stocks, and so I think we need to be extremely cautious about decisions that are based on inflation projections of inflation, because I'm not certain. I'm right now, frankly, with regard to our economy, I'm more concerned about the Middle East than anything else, because I think that's going to have a dramatic impact on our economy in the next couple of years. So, and it could have a devastating effect, depending on which way things go. So, yes, I think it would be great to have, what do you call it, a sensitivity?
Sensitivity analysis. So
sensitivity, to be sensitive to my sensitivities, or what?
Where inflation's going to go.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think if you could provide us with conservative estimates, more conservative estimates, and extremely conservative estimates, that would help us. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great question, Richard. Mr. Cardenas, did you?
I asked a bunch of questions the last time this was in committee, and I think the current staff at CRA has tried to do their best to clarify and admit of mistakes that were made in the past, or what have you. To the gentleman's point of fraud, it would have to be determined as to whether or not it was willful omission of information back in 2006, or was it just somebody not doing their job. That would be for a court to decide, or some other jurisdiction to bring about that investigation, especially when those individuals of 2006 who were charged with these responsibilities of presenting and analyzing, et cetera, it's my understanding that they're no longer with CRA?
No, correct.
Okay. So it does me no good to ask you questions about what was going on in the minds of the individuals that were working for CRA at the time, reporting to the board and reporting to the council back then, because they're not here. Now, Mr. D'Antona, you mentioned that subsequent to this effort where the CRA had its own appraisal and they eventually went with an appraisal that was paid for by the actual developer. You're saying that since then, the CRA formally has written policy saying that they will no longer do that?
Correct. We had administrative policies written that do not allow us to accept a developer's appraisal through and being peer reviewed. We have to do our own appraisal. So if
somebody shoves an appraisal in CRA's face and says, no, your appraisal's no good, look at this one, use this one, CRA will tell them, that's nice, but we will not use that.
Correct. We have to use our own. Correct? I mean,
Yes, but we may negotiate if there's a difference in...
right, but that would then be brought in the record.
20% latitude based on the in-house appraisal.
Right, and if we needed to negotiate further because it was a property that we really want and a key property, we would negotiate, but we would take it to the board for approval.
With
an explanation, yes.
Of all of the...
In-house.
Right, in-house and their outside, and why we are going either above and beyond what our in-house analysis would say. And then it would be up to the board and or the council to...
But even within that negotiation, the actual appraisal of a third party would not be utilized as fact. It might be a factor of argument, but it would not be the appraisal that the basis for that price would take place.
Correct.
Hold on a second. I'm not looking at you.
You're looking at me, and I think it would be a piece of information. I'm not going to say it absolutely would not be used. It would be, in the reconciliation of the peer review, the peer reviewer may say that our appraiser got it wrong and the other appraiser got it right, or, there's some combination of both of them. So I'm not going to say that we absolutely wouldn't use it, because the subsequent review may say, there were some differences.
Yeah, but see, my point is this. What disturbs me is that the CRA paid for an appraisal, a certified appraisal. Somebody tossed CRA their own appraisal, and CRA used that appraisal that was tossed to them, paid for by an interested party that benefited from a higher appraisal. Jesus, what I'm saying is you would have had adverse benefits had the CRA used their lower appraisal. Now, are you going to shake your head and speak out again and say that you would not have received adverse effects had the CRA used their $4 million appraisal? You want to split hairs with me? Come here, sir. Yeah, the developer, the main guy who came up first. I'm sorry, your name is?
My name's Hal Kaczorski.
Yes, Hal. A lot of not so nice things have been said about you, and guess what? I really don't care. All right? We're not in a court of law. We're here to just try to ascertain facts as best as people are willing to speak up to those facts here before this council.
Right.
So now that you spoke up, I'm going to ask you a question. Had the CRA used the $4 million appraisal instead of the $5.45 million appraisal that was done by the developer, I'm assuming you had some party to that appraisal at the time in 2006, would the $4 million appraisal had an adverse effect financially on the developer, you, at the time, if they would have used that instead of the $5.45 million appraisal?
If we had known that the CRA had an appraisal separate from ours, because we were asked to do an appraisal both by our bank and by the CRA. We went out and we hired what we thought was the best appraisal company possible, CB Richard Ellis. They went and they did their independent appraisal. We used that appraisal. We made it available to the CRA. We only found out about this other appraisal about 4 months ago.
You mean 4 months from today?
Yes. We knew nothing about it at the time. Had we known something about it at the time, we would have used it in our negotiation with the seller, obviously.
So,
and we would have...
You're contending, see, it was alluded to that somebody at CRA was not forthright about putting forth that $4 million appraisal to the CRA board, to the council in 2006 at that time. And you're even contending that you guys didn't even know about that appraisal either?
We didn't know about it until it surfaced about 4 months ago.
Who was in charge of the CRA in 2006?
I believe that was Cecilia Estelano.
Cecilia Estelano. And she's a lawyer, right? It's my understanding.
It's my understanding.
She's a lawyer. So, as I was saying earlier, I think it's very obvious that that $4 million appraisal was something that somebody within CRA felt it was either not necessary or it was adversely affecting whatever somebody's agenda was inside of CRA. It's not your fault, the developer, that they didn't bring it to your attention. That's not your job.
I wish they had.
You're telling me that the CRA, you said your bank or your potential lender or what have you at the time, and the CRA had asked that you, the developer, provide an appraisal.
That's correct.
And you did so.
And we did so.
Okay, that's not your fault. You just did what you were asked, right?
We did exactly what we were asked, as we have through this whole process. And I do want to, if I may, just take a half a minute. Mr. Mcnaughton brought up some very serious charges today. He said we had nothing to do with Albuquerque and we were thrown out. I want to make it perfectly clear on the record. We are the owners and we are the managers of Albuquerque Studios. Albuquerque Studios is very profitable. It's full. It will be full for the next year. And I don't like being the target, nor does anyone else, of really false comments. And his comments are false. He made another comment that we've been subject to 30 lawsuits. I've been a developer in this city for over 20 years. I've developed 20 shopping centers. One of the things you get as a shopping center developer is slip and falls. Most of those 30 lawsuits were slip and falls. I couldn't even tell you what happened to them. They went to insurance companies. But I can tell you this. There are no lawsuits against my company, Pacifica Ventures, today, and there have never been any judgments against us. And I want that to go on the record. We've done everything we've been asked to do, and we've spent $4 million to prove our point, to put this project forward. With all the delays and everything else, this is now a shovel-ready project, and we'd like to move forward with it. We think it's still necessary, we think it's a good project, and we think the city of Los Angeles will benefit very greatly by it.
Well, that's your opinion. I hope you're right. But I appreciate you taking the opportunity of personal privilege of clarifying your name, because some very, very nasty things have been said about you, and also some documents have been submitted to this committee, saying things like you just pointed out that were said about you verbally in this committee. I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just curious how you're going to land this plane. So go on. I want to watch the close.
What's unfortunate here is, and I'm glad you pointed out that the CRA asked you for that appraisal, because that's the first time I've heard that CRA had anything to do with that third-party appraisal being submitted to CRA. I just assumed that a developer would love to give their appraisal and provide it to anybody who'd like to pay attention to it. But to be asked for it by CRA, to me, is a very different story. And again, that's not your fault. I see no fault in that. You're asked by CRA to do something, and you gladly did it. You expended money to get that appraisal done.
We were asked by the CRA to go out and try to buy this property because The owner at the time, Ullman, would not deal with the CRA. We went and we did a arm's length negotiation with Mr. Ullman for a price of $5,450,000. We then went out to our bank, and the bank naturally said, get an appraisal, which we, in the normal course of things, hire the best, most competent appraisers we can. We thought C.B. Richard Ellis is certainly a competent name in the appraisal business. They submitted their appraisal. CRA asked us for it, as the bank did. We gladly gave it because it supported the price.
And then CRA utilized it. But again, that's no fault of yours. They asked for an appraisal. You're not surprised that they used it, correct?
Right. We went forward. No, not surprised at all. We went forward, bought the land, and then subsequently sold it to the CRA for the exact same price that we paid for it, and we absorbed the transaction costs.
Why did you get involved in this arm's length transaction? Was it the previous owner that asked you to get involved? Did CRA say, hey, could somebody please deal with us because this property owner doesn't want to deal with us? How did it come about that you got involved?
My company has done a lot of work in the entertainment industry, and we have built a lot of buildings for the entertainment industry over the years, and we were approached by the CRA to see if we would be interested in doing this project, and as part of doing that, could we go out and buy the land and sell it to the CRA so they would have this valuable piece of land in their portfolio.
Okay. And you're not responsible for what CRA does. I would never interject.
Hopefully
you are
not.
responsible for what CRA does. I don't even like the idea that we have some responsibility over CRA sometimes. But, Mr. Chairman, it's unfortunate that, in my opinion, from what I see, we're really trying to make chicken salad out of chicken leftovers, is the best I can put it. So the fact that the CRA got this third party involved and encouraged them to do what they've done, and the fact that the CRA's documents, they're in charge of their documents, and the fact that they can't ascertain the whereabouts of certain documents and certain activities that occurred within CRA is really not the developer's fault or problem. That's really our problem. What I'd like to see the CRA do is provide documents to the council that actually explain how this kind of thing can't happen again, where their procedures are in fact tight enough to where they can't use a third-party appraisal, especially when they have their own appraisal and the two appraisals don't match. We should only use in-house appraisals. If we have to pay for a second appraisal, we should pay for it ourselves. We should not have a third party pay for that appraisal. There's no question that in the real estate industry, it's almost as bad as lawyers. You get three appraisals, the three appraisals are not going to match. They're all going to say three different things. So I was just out of frustration, I wasn't going to vote for this, but I think that the party, believe it or not, that should be most frustrated is the public first for having to watch all this, and then the developer for having to hang out for so many years and not even be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel as to when we're going to actually allow this thing to be developed, which at the end of the day hopefully will benefit the public. So,
well, I see a couple of options. Depends on the comfort level of the committee. I think that you and Mr. Alarcon and Mr. Reyes in particular, all of you, have asked some very important questions, have requested some very important documents that I think will help us move forward, not only where it relates to this issue, but that will bring, create a better agency going forward. So what I'd like to suggest is that we incorporate requests made by Mr. Reyes, Mr. Alarcon, Mr. Cardenas, and that you furnish that information. I will let them reiterate what it is that they wanted in their own terms. I will also make a request to the president that he afford us, I think this was due to be heard on Friday, maybe it should be heard sometime next week, to afford them the opportunity to put in place the information that we request. But again, it's the president's district, and I will let him make the call. But I don't think a few days will destroy it. I think it might help where it relates to the integrity of the project. So with that said, and I want you to know that if you come back with documents and my comfort level is not there after I review, then I want to reserve the right to alter my support. So it is contingent upon what you can produce for us. So with that said, I think I'd like, Mr. Reyes, if you could restate some of your concerns. And Mr. Alarcon, if you could restate some of yours, then maybe we can move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for, again, background, what are the time-sensitive deadlines? Do we have CEQA? Do we have any legal deadlines that does not give us more time that you're aware of? No? So we can get a few more days. Okay, great. So just to reiterate, on a one-page summary, I want to be very clear what we invested in this project. What of our public funds, public-generated funds, were used in this project. Then I want to be very clear what is going to be gained, what has been gained currently, and what's projected to be gained based on the assumptions that support your assertion of what is to be gained. And I want you to use every level of impact, whether it's tax increment, tax base. I would ask for ancillary benefit, but that is very vague at this stage. So I'd rather just focus on the project site itself.
Okay.
On a one-pager, very simple, very basic, very clear.
Absolutely.
And you could do all your assumptions you want on notes that are attached.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, and before I ask Richard, I've just been informed by Mr. Garcetti's office that there's no problem in this being moved to next week. We're related to, what did you call the thing?
Sensitivities.
Sensitivity.
Yeah,
Sensitive.
the sensitivity analysis.
I've never heard of it.
I've been involved in quite a few of those, actually. Okay. I think what is most troubling about this project is that CRA was knowledgeable that there was an appraisal of $4 million, and it encouraged a developer to buy the same project at $1.2 million more, $1.4 million more than what they knew to be the appraisal, without informing the developer. The relationship that CRA has, the relationships that CRA develops are critical to the confidence that developers will place in negotiations with the CRA. And I think this project is demonstrative of undermining the trust levels that are necessary in an effective CRA operation. And then you have to ask yourself, why would the CRA not let the developer know that they had an appraisal of $4 million? And I can only believe that somebody at the CRA was interested in benefiting Mr. Ullman, who walked away with $1.4 million more than what the CRA's appraised value was. And that may be a serious problem, I don't know. But that is not the decision that I have to make. The decision that I have to make is, notwithstanding what are very troubling facts with regard to the knowledge that the CRA had about an appraisal, the encouragement it gave to the developer to move forward with a higher appraisal, and with the then turnaround to recommend an investment to cover the higher appraisal. My decision is based on whether or not this will be a good deal moving forward. Based on the current numbers, the fact is the man spent the $5.4 million. That's already done, and if there are any problems with that, they're in retrospect. But moving forward, is the $5.4 million invested by CRA into this project to benefit from tax increment projections moving forward, and allowing us to have more economic development in the Hollywood area? You know, that's my decision. That's what I have to decide on. So before I can make a decision, I have to have that information. I have to know what, as Mr. Reyes called it, what the assumptions are in projecting the tax increment benefit to this project. And I want more conservative, and extremely conservative estimates, so that we can give others more confidence if even in an extremely conservative analysis, the CRA will be paid back, and will be paid back more than whole. And if you can meet that, that's fine. I would like to know more about why the $4 million appraisal, when that occurred. I need more information about it. I believe there was some information that passed my desk at some point, maybe in the last time this thing came up, but I need to review that again to find out why there's such a great difference in the appraisals, but also why that information was not provided to the developer. Particularly, I mean, if the developer had done that on their own without conversations with CRA, it would mean nothing to me. But the fact was, CRA told him to invest and didn't tell him that they had an appraisal of $4 million on a given date. And that would have greatly assisted his transaction, and probably would have reduced the price. And I'm very troubled by that. It may in fact be more than just troubling. I don't even want to get into that stuff. But I think somebody should. So I need that analysis before I can say yea or nay. I want to vote for this project. I'll say that in public. I want to vote for this problem. I want to say that. I want to vote for this problem. I meant to say I want to vote for this project because if in doing so we generate jobs, we generate a more robust and improvement to Hollywood. Having been on the council when Hollywood was in dire straits, and seeing the transformation of Hollywood, and greatly appreciated that transformation. And just because I'm from the North Valley doesn't mean that I can't appreciate something beneficial to Los Angeles in Hollywood or downtown or West Side or wherever it may be. So that's what my decision will be based on, and it won't be. I just as soon send this on to council without a recommendation, because we have more information, and then let the president of the council, in whose district this serves, explain to the council as a whole, and we can all make the decision at the same time with the same information.
Okay, so before Mr. Cardenas indicates to you what he wanted, I hear where you're coming from, Mr. Alarcon, but what I had hoped that there would be action taken by this committee where we would reserve the right to change our mind if the data that we receive from them does not satisfy us. But and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cardenas now. But one of the things that Mr. Cardenas did say that I want to make sure is, what are you going to do, and how is it going to be written? How is the policy going to be changed where this will never happen again, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I'd like, I need to see in what form the policy change has been made. Was it voted on by the board? Was it something just done administratively, internally? And what documentation and authority that change actually has? Because it needs to be something where it's not going to happen again. It's just bad practice for anybody to use somebody else's appraisal that they paid for, that they may benefit from a higher appraisal or a lower appraisal, depending on what side of the transaction they're on. Okay, thank you.
Understood.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is maybe we call for a voice vote on this now. It's my understanding that there's some kind of an addition or an amendment to 5B, if you could read what that is.
Correct. There is an amended HCD findings that have been submitted to the clerk regarding the CEQA DDA in Section 33433 report.
Okay, so now can we vote on the three together? As
You
amended?
can, yes, you can. So, Mr. Alcon's abstaining?
Okay, well, let's call let's call the vote. By the time we finish, it'll be out.
Okay, he's out.
Yeah.
He's up.
Who does that? You, Sharon?
Mr. Chair, there are three separate issues here. For clarification, it's best to
Okay, let's
take
go
action
5A.
on each.
5A.
5A, which is the disposition and development agreement. And I'll do a voice. Councilmember Wesson?
Aye.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Aye.
Councilmember Reyes?
Yes.
Okay. So 5A is approved. 5B is the environmental issue. Councilmember Wesson?
As amended, right?
As amended, yes. Councilmember Cardenas?
Aye.
And Councilmember Reyes?
Yes.
Okay, this is approved as amended. The last issue, 5C, is the settlement agreement. Councilmember Wesson?
Aye.
Councilmember Cardenas?
Aye.
Councilmember Reyes?
Yes.
And that item is approved.
Okay, so without objections, we move those three items. Is there any more business before this committee?
No, there's not.
This committee's adjourned.